Victor Mature goes blind and tragically dies after revealing a painful secret.
Many of Hollywood's most famous actors and actresses from the Golden Age kept hidden identities. On his deathbed, the actor whose imposing presence and rugged good features brought him fame makes a surprising confession. The man who brought biblical epics and film noir masterpieces to life, Victor Mature, spent his last days growing blind, cut off from the public that once admired him. It wasn't the encroaching night that haunted him the most, though. It was something far more agonizing, a weight he'd kept hidden for years. Why would a Hollywood legend, who had been quiet for practically their entire career, suddenly spill the beans on a tragic secret? Had he concealed a mystery family tragedy behind his fame and splendor? Or was it the guilt that had followed him from the dawn of his career? After he finally let go of his guilt, why did his health decline so quickly? Born on January 29, 1920 in Louisville, Kentucky, to a Swiss father who operated a local cutlery business, Victor John Mature became the ruggedly gorgeous actor whose name would light cinema marquees throughout America. Rather than glitz and luxury, young Victor's upbringing was centered around humility and toil. Working as an apprentice in his father's shop, Samson honed the dexterity and focus necessary to wield Samson's strength on screen. That this immigrant boy would become one of Hollywood's most famous starring males is something few could have foreseen. After a short stay at the Kentucky Military Institute, he finally found his niche in California's Pasadena Playhouse. There, Mature's inherent magnetism was shaped into an object the camera would find appealing. But Hollywood isn't exactly known for its laissez-faire policies. Mature had aspirations that were greater than the meager wages he earned from his various occupations, selling refrigerators and painting walls before he broke through. It wasn't until producers paid attention that they spotted the future star that millions of people would love, a charismatic leading man whose appearance alone could hold an audience's interest even before he spoke. The pivotal moment came in 1940. In 1 million BC, Mature appeared on screen with an almost supernatural physique as the ancient hero Tumak. The once regular refrigerator salesperson was thrust into superstar overnight. Mature was an immediate hit because, to his rock-solid physique, jawline that seemed carved from stone, and commanding screen presence. Taking advantage of this surge in popularity, he had a series of successful films in the 1940s, including My Gal Sal, 7 Days Leave, and the film noir classic I Wake Up Screaming. These films highlighted not only his commanding presence, but also his impressive versatility as an actor, demonstrating his ability to convincingly portray both romantic and dramatic roles. However, Mature's most famous parts were in biblical epics. Many people couldn't help but associate Mature with the iconic strongman Samson, whom he played with such conviction in Cecil B. DeMille's Samson and Delilah. The Robe, Demetrius, and the Gladiators were among his other historical plays, and his status as a Hollywood legend was solidified by the film's popularity. These films elevated Mature above the status of a simple celebrity and made him a symbol of the post-war American ideal of strong, heroic men. His inspiring newfound understanding of himself is what makes Mature's ascent so intriguing. A charmingly modest star, Mature famously redirected compliments with self-deprecating jokes. "I'm no actor, and I've got 64 pictures to prove it." His charisma and depth as an entertainer were enhanced by his refusal to take himself too seriously, in contrast to many celebrities who believed in their own mythology. Even more impressive than his heroic representations was Mature's ability to show his real character, which set him apart from many of his Hollywood colleagues. Even though he was a famous actor, Victor Mature never let his pride get in the way of his patriotism throughout his peak. At the height of his stardom, he did what few celebrities would dare. He enlisted in the U.S. Coast Guard as World War II swept the country. It was an authentic display of patriotism from an individual who prioritized duty over fame, not a PR ploy staged by a studio. Mature rose up the ranks to become chief boatswain's mate after an impressive stint in the South Pacific. Instead of a famous actor, his fellow Coast Guardsmen saw a committed soldier who understood and sympathized with their dangers and struggles. Being a hero was more than just a role for Mature. He served his country during the war, away from the spotlight and the cheers, and it showed the real him, a patriotism that was based on his principles and deeds rather than his public character or performance. Something had changed inside Mature by the time he got back to Hollywood after the war. A new dimension to his approach to fame and money emerged as he restarted his acting career. He started to seek more than just employment. He wanted more agency in his work and more chances to start his own business in the industry he had dominated. By the 1950s, he had progressed to the point where he had partnered with United Artists to form Romina Productions, and subsequently with the renowned John Wayne to start Batjock Productions. By juggling these responsibilities, Mature was able to make the transition from actor to producer with works like China Doll, in which he acted and produced simultaneously. Along with his financial savvy, Mature's determination to develop his career on his own terms and break away from being only a hired face and physique was underlined by this change. He revealed grandiose intentions for upcoming projects such as Vaults of Heaven and The Incurables. Even if not all of his plans came to fruition, they showcased his resolve to forge his own way. The Western genre was also a good fit for his skills. He played the stereotypical cowboy, negotiating the ethical minefields of the frontier in United Artists' Escort West. He was already a versatile performer, but his rugged good looks and strong stage presence made him an instant hit in the genre. A major undertaking around this time was Timbuktu, an excursion for the French Foreign Legion that took Mature to the breathtaking North African terrain. Playing a character completing dangerous tasks under Jacques Tourneur's supervision was another example of his versatility and success in a wide range of media. After Mature and producer Irwin Allen became close in the late 1950s, Allen cast him in the starring role of the Big Circus. He was able to expand his already remarkable repertoire with this daring initiative, which took him into the vibrant world of circus performers. Mature shown that he could credibly play any part that producers could conjure up, whether it be a cowboy, a military hero, or a circus artist. Hannibal, an Italian peplum picture in which he played the famous Carthaginian general with his signature intensity, and The Bandit of Sherwood Forest were further additions to his growing resume. Working with Orson Welles on The Tartars further cemented his connection to historical epics, a genre that had mostly characterized his career up until that point. Something was happening within Mature, though, despite their ongoing success and seeming adaptability. He startled many in the profession by deciding to retire from acting at the age of 46. In response to a subsequent question on this decision, he candidly stated, as is his wont, that he had lost interest. Being well off monetarily and maybe sick of the Hollywood system, he announced his plan to retire early and focus on laziness. Nevertheless, Mature's private struggles persisted long after he retired from filming, illuminating a multifaceted individual whose influence went well beyond his on-screen personas. The guy behind Victor Mature's colossal ego was a lonely soul who yearned for human connection. Like his on-screen personas, his real life was full of twists and turns. Throughout his rise to stardom and money, he tied the knot 5 times, each marriage reflecting his need for emotional stability in the face of the lonely life of a superstar. Little is known about his first marriage to Frances Charles, although it was an attempt to strike a balance between popularity and personal fulfillment. After this, he tied the knot with Martha Stephenson Kemp, whose prior marriage to famous big band leader Hal Kemp had introduced her to the entertainment industry. Martha may have gained a special understanding of the precariousness of life from her own personal experience with tragedy. Hal's death in a car accident in 1940, yet their relationship still couldn't survive. A more subdued period in Mature's love life began with his third marriage to Dorothy Stanford Barry. Dorothy became entangled in Victor's intricate story, even though she was not a prominent person in her own right. Adrienne Ervik, his fourth wife, was another transient effort at finding true connection in his famous life. At the age of 61, Mature tied the knot for the fifth and last time in 1974, and it seems like he finally found the answer he had been seeking. He spent the remainder of his life in the company of Loretta Sabina, whom he wed. Mature may have found the stability and companionship he had sought during his 4 prior marriages in their long-lasting partnership, which lasted for more than 20 years until his death in 1999. Victoria Mature, the only child of Victor and Loretta, would continue the lovely tradition of artistic excellence in her family by becoming an opera singer. In addition to his marriages, Mature has a lustful relationship with several A-list Hollywood celebs. Highlighting Mature's position inside Hollywood aristocracy, he had a brief engagement with movie diva Rita Hayworth before she wed filmmaker Orson Welles. The legendary 1930s and 1940s cinema actress Anne Shirley was also engaged to him. In addition to solidifying his reputation as one of Hollywood's most alluring leading men off-screen, these high-profile romances enriched Mature's complicated personal story. However, Mature encountered far more terrifying obstacles as the years went by and he withdrew from public life than the ebb and flow of love. A new sort of shadow fell upon him as his health began to deteriorate. This shadow would force him to face the demons he had buried for far too long. Victor Mature, who had been the Hollywood standard for physical strength for decades, found himself in a fight that was more intensely personal and tragic than anything he had shown in his films as the turn of the century drew to a close. Mature was progressively going blind as he hid out in his Rancho Santa Fe mansion, away from the prying eyes of the populace who had formerly followed him everywhere. The patient was found to be suffering from age-related macular degeneration, a disease that gradually weakens central vision while leaving the periphery unaffected. That gradual blindness befell someone whose expressive eyes had enchanted millions was an especially terrible turn of events. The vision deterioration and other health problems he was already experiencing were worsened by consequences from untreated diabetes. With the onset of nightfall, Mature withdrew even further from the limelight. A man whose commanding presence had once graced the silver screen now walked gingerly through his house, using memory to guide him through rooms that became increasingly foreboding as the days went by. His friends saw a dramatic change in his temperament, including repressed anger, sadness in reflective moments, and an increasing tendency to withdraw from social interactions as his ability to perceive visual stimuli deteriorated. Darkness engulfed his vision, and with it, increasingly intense and persistent flashbacks from his past. His ability to selectively forget, which had served him well throughout his career, started to deteriorate. Thoughts he had repressed for decades started to resurface more frequently and with more clarity in the peaceful isolation of his dwindling universe. With bravery that few could fathom, the actor who had portrayed Samson now confronted his own frailty. Learning to navigate by touch what he had previously known by sight and discovering new ways to perceive the world as old ones went away. His daily routine became a monument to flexibility and tenacity. Literacy and other once-enjoyed activities became insurmountable obstacles, and he had to depend on others to keep him apprised of news and his favorite stories. Even though his visual world was diminishing, his connection to life remained intact thanks to his daughter Victoria, who became his most faithful friend throughout this era by reading to him, explaining the changing seasons, and more. During this time, their bond became stronger, and the legendary performer came to rely on his daughter's nurturing in ways he hadn't foreseen, as her creative trajectory mirrors his own foray into the spotlight. Even as Mature learned to live with his physical limitations, his closest friends and family could tell that he was struggling with more than just his eyesight or his health. Time seemed to be slipping away from him, and he felt an increasing sense of urgency to convey anything, whether it was his vision or something else entirely. This sense of urgency seems to grow as 1999 went on. Mature started opening up more and more about his life and profession, both the good times and the bad. On occasion, he would pause in the middle of a phrase, as if on the verge of a revelation, before retracing his steps. His loved ones could see that he was struggling with a fundamental decision: whether to die carrying a secret that had followed him about for so long. As that year came to a close and Mature's health continued to decline, he made a choice that would add the most dramatic turn to a life full of them. He was now prepared to speak up. After decades of keeping quiet, no matter the cost, even people who believed they knew him best would be surprised by what happened next. With his vision nearly gone, Victor Mature made a choice in the solitude of his Rancho Santa Fe house that would add the last tragic chapter to his extraordinary life tale. He decided to finally let go of a secret that had followed him about Hollywood since his early days, after decades of meticulously crafting his public image. An unusual interview, taped in secret for use in a biography, was the source of the discovery. With a voice quivering with passion and age, Mature began to talk publicly about situations he had never spoken before, taking what started as a normal reflection on his career into unknown terrain. In the dim realm of his invisibility, recollections from almost 50 years ago were crystal clear. There were two versions of his confession that surfaced. One about his faked brother's death while filming Kiss of Death, and the other about a failed affair with a young actress who committed suicide. They both got to the heart of the matter. Victor Mature had spent the better part of his adult life battling an overwhelming sense of guilt. During his early days as a famous actor, he had a passionate but short-lived affair, as detailed in the first story. The relationship came to a sudden end when his agency pushed him to distance himself to protect his reputation. The young woman allegedly committed herself not long after, crushed by the film industry's expectations and her own sentiments of rejection. Mature quietly regretted himself for decades, even though he was never officially linked to the occurrence. Studio officials were afraid of negative publicity and covered up a terrible accident that Mature's younger brother experienced while filming Kiss of Death, according to the other narrative. Just before he departed for good, the confession appeared to absolve him of any wrongdoing. Audience members noted that once Mature said the truth, his voice seemed to relax, as if he had finally let go of a burden he had carried for years. Considering his history as an on-screen hero, this act of candor demanded, arguably, the highest form of bravery. The readiness to be remembered not as perfect or colossal, but as deeply flawed and human. Authenticity, which had evaded Victor Mature even in his most celebrated performances, was now there in those last recorded remarks. However, the surprise ended up being much more than that. As if the release of his spiritual load had sent a message to his body, Mature's health suddenly deteriorated not long after his confession, in what looked like a sad coincidence. The burden of truth, once stated, appeared to hasten his deterioration in health. Someone close to him saw a quick decline in his already delicate health in the days after he confessed. The guy who had brought such life to his portrayal of Samson now appeared to be giving in to the effects of old age, sickness, and maybe, poetically speaking, the relief that came with finally voicing his mind. Already had most of the world cut off from him due to his eyesight, other systems started to fail at the same time. His visual loss was not the only organ affected by the diabetes. The long-controlled heart condition suddenly became more active. Worryingly, the previously undisclosed diagnosis of leukemia progressed at an alarming rate. Victoria, Mature's daughter, was by his side constantly throughout his last days. On occasion, she would just sit in quiet companionship with his hand in hers while reading aloud from his favorite books, or describing the shifting patterns of sunlight streaming through his windows. In a beautiful irony, the powerful Samson was now reliant on the nurturing care of his daughter, whose career in the arts paralleled his own foray into performing. When word got out among his old co-workers and admirers about his confession, they were quite supportive and understanding. His bravery in finally revealing his burden was praised by several of his longtime co-workers who offered notes of respect. Some said they could feel something behind his cheerful demeanor, but they had no idea his buried suffering was so great. This tidal surge of understanding and acceptance would pass Mature before she could fully appreciate it. At the age of 86, Victor Mature took his last breath on August 4, 1999, in the solace of his Rancho Santa Fe home. According to the official report, his death was caused by heart failure exacerbated by leukemia. However, some who were there during his last days thought that he had finally let go of his guilt and allowed himself to just let go.